By the end of this video, my goal is to completely change your outlook on what the One Piece is, and to do my best to prove to you that Nika was not a retcon, because Luffy was always meant to be a sun god. I'm going to do this by first explaining to you what exactly is going on with the image in the thumbnail. We're going to start with the explanation of what we know the One Piece is, the All Blue. The world of One Piece is fundamentally disconnected due to a combination of the Red Line and the Grand Line. The destruction of Mary Joie, and potentially the entire Red Line, fixes this issue, uniting the North, South, East, and West Blues into the All Blue, making the world one piece. However, I believe there is another aspect to the One Piece that has gone unnoticed by the fanbase. In the Ohara flashback, we see that the centerpiece of the library was a geocentric model of the solar system. Many fans just took this as a reference to our own planet's past, when it was believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system, as well as an allusion to the Gorosei centering around Imu. However, I believe this model is accurate to One Piece's solar system. Not only is the planet fragmented, but their solar system is as well, and both must be made whole in order to achieve the One Piece. This is the reason the Grand Line and Calm Belt exist, and the reason for the weird magnetism and weather patterns of the Grand Line. Currently, the 5 inner planets are orbiting the Earth, represented by the Gorosei and Imu, while the outer 3 planets, represented by the ancient weapons, fall outside of this orbit, which is why they remain outside of government control. This is the entire reason that Oda made Luffy a sun god. He will fix this by the end of the series, returning these planets and the Earth to the sun's orbit. This is what the dawn of the world truly is, the creation of the All Blue while making the planets orbit the sun, making both their world and solar system one piece. I'm going to first explain some of the core concepts behind how all of this works, then show you afterwards some of the hints and foreshadowing that Oda left starting very early on in the series towards this aspect of the One Piece. First, I would like to go over exactly what I believe the Will of D is. Part of the reason I believe Oda made the D an initial was not only to hide its true meaning, but to hide the fact that it is actually 2 different words. For people like Luffy, it means dawn, and for people like Blackbeard, it means dusk. Dawn and dusk are both words that begin with D that are opposites, yet intricately connected, 2 sides of the same coin, like Luffy and Blackbeard. The D is also a symbol representing the sun or moon on the horizon, which works for both dawn and dusk. Now, while Luffy's goal is to create the One Piece through the dawn of the world, I believe Blackbeard has his own version of the One Piece, the so-called dusk of the world. Luffy's version of the One Piece is an interconnected world through the destruction of the Red Line, accomplished by making the planets orbit the sun, the will of dawn. Blackbeard's version of the One Piece is to make the Red Line the one piece of inhabitable land on the planet, accomplished by making the planets orbit the moon, the will of dusk. The moon controls the tides, and I believe that making it the center of the solar system will cause the tides to rise even higher, leaving the raised Red Line as the only inhabitable piece of land, making it much easier for Blackbeard to control everyone as king of the world. This is what I believe the final conflict of the story will be. Both Luffy's and Blackbeard's forces taking down the world government, then fighting for their individual interpretations of the Will of D. This is where Oda took the Peacemanes and Morganeers concept that was in a prototype version of One Piece. The pirates that follow the Dawn ideology are the Peacemanes, and the ones following the Dusk ideology are the Morganeers. I believe this goes all the way back to at least Joy Boy's time. Just like we have Luffy and Blackbeard representing dawn and dusk in the present, we had Roger and Rox in Roger's time, and Joy Boy and Davy Jones in Joy Boy's time. Next, the Celestial Incarnations. There are 11 celestial bodies that are important here, the Sun, the Moon, the Earth, and the 8 other planets. We have direct confirmation that at least 7 of these celestial bodies have personifications in the world of One Piece. Luffy as the Sun, Shirahoshi as Neptune, and the Gorosei as the 5 inner planets. I believe all 11 of these celestial bodies have representations in the world of One Piece, and this is what the ancient weapons truly are. There are going to be multiple candidates for these celestial incarnations. The ones backing Luffy and his vision of the Will of Dawn, heliocentrism, ones backing Blackbeard's vision for the Will of Dusk, lunarcentrism, and the ones heading the world government, geocentrism. It's also important to note that Blackbeard may not need a candidate for every planet, like Emu did not need every planet to accomplish the geocentric universe. Near the end of this video, I will go over who exactly I think these incarnations are, but I would first like to go over who I believe the Sun, Moon, and Earth are, and what the original 3 ancient weapons are, because it will be important throughout the video. Now when it comes to the pirate candidates, I believe the Sun, Moon, and Earth are all going to be D-Clan members, because these are the 3 celestial bodies involved in Dawn and Dusk. This is why Oda made Vivi, Law, and Blackbeard D-Clan members. Vivi is the Earth of Dawn, Law is the Moon of Dawn, and Blackbeard is the Moon of Dusk. Now on to the original 3 ancient weapons. In Greco-Roman mythology, Poseidon is a god of the sea, Uranus is a god of the sky, and Pluton, better known as Hades, was a god of the underworld, with land being his domain. We know the way that Shirahoshi's Poseidon powers manifest is through the command of the Sea Kings, otherwise known as the Neptunians. Momo was born in Wano, where Pluton is said to reside, could hear the voice of all things, which I believe is connected to these celestial incarnations, and could command Zunesha, which I believe is an Earth King, whereas they likely will be known as the Plutonians. Pluton is Momo. The Pluton that Momo's grandfather said was slumbering under Wano is another one of these Plutonians for Momo to command. And finally, I believe Uranus is going to be able to command Sky Kings, or Uranians, one of which I believe to be the giant snakes of Skypiea, with another I suspect being whatever hatched out of the giant egg on Roger's ship. The original 3 ancient weapons all come in 2 parts. The Neptunians, Plutonians, and Uranians, these are the actual weapon part of the ancient weapons, while the celestial incarnations of the planets are the trigger for these weapons. As for the other planets, I do not know what their celestial powers will be, outside of the Earth, which I will go over later. You may think Saturn's paralytic gaze may be part of these powers, and you may be right. However, those powers are derived from the yokai he was based on, and I believe it is much more likely those powers come from a Zoan devil fruit. So how did Emu change the solar system in this way, and how will Luffy change it back? And on top of that, since we've just established Uranus as a person, what destroyed Lelouja? Well, I believe both questions have the same answer, God Valley, which I believe holds a weapon capable of not only destroying Mary Joie, but altering the size of planets. God Valley seemingly vanished without a trace, and we have seen a very similar situation to this in the story before, with Jaya and Skypiea. Nolan found the City of Gold, but once he told his king of its existence, he came back only for the city to have completely vanished. Half of Jaya remained on the surface, while the other half was sent into the sky by a knock-up stream, and I believe the exact same thing happened to God Valley, right down to splitting the island in half. Many people have drawn the connection between God Valley and Thriller Bark, because the zombies of the former Rocks pirates were part of Moria's crew, and we know that the island that makes Thriller Bark came from the West Blue, just like God Valley. However, this is only half of God Valley. The other half was blown into the sky by a knock-up stream. This is what the split peak of God Valley is hinting at. In Skypiea's case, it landed on top of a giant beanstalk, which will be mirrored when God Valley is floating above Sunlight Tree Eve. where Mary Joie is located. Oda drew further connections between Jaya and Thriller Bark with the giant shadowy figures in both arcs, though Thriller Bark's shadows are definitely not just giant shadows, as we see its eyes, though they may be connected to Emu, as it would make sense for him to keep an eye on God Valley. Jaya was also where Kuma, a survivor of the God Valley incident, was introduced into the story, while Thriller Bark was where he first confronted the Straw Hats. Oda also drew a direct connection between Enel destroying Angel Island on Skypiea and the destruction of Lelouja, which I believe was destroyed by this weapon on God Valley. This is also why Doflamingo was ordered to execute Moria at the end of Part 1. The government wanted the other half of God Valley to complete the weapon, though Moria escaped. Now the key to all of this is Kaido's Devil Fruit and the Mother Flame. The government desperately wanted Kaido's Devil Fruit. This is why they had Vegapunk create a copy of it, though he told them it was a failure. There is a very specific reason the government wanted the Dragon Fruit so badly. Kaido's fruit has one very important power that no other Devil Fruit has, the ability to move islands through the use of flame clouds. Emu understood that the time when the planets would align was coming up, and wanted to both potentially prepare the weapon to bring the outer planets into Earth's orbit, and to keep it away from Joy Boy's successor. They decided to hold their killing game on God Valley that year to clear the island of its inhabitants to prepare, and potentially knew that the knock-up stream was coming, so it was now or never. They killed the former user of Kaido's fruit, and offered the fruit as a prize because they knew they could control whichever celestial dragon won it. Things did not go as planned, however, and Kaido ended up with the fruit, which is why they tried so many different ways to kill him instead of just letting him rot and impel down. They needed the fruit, they just couldn't kill him. Yet the government didn't seem to have an interest in killing Kaido during Wano, instead instructing CP0 to focus on killing Luffy and kidnapping Robin, because the Mother Flame accomplishes the same thing for them. The Mother Flame, through some method or another, allows the government to create flame clouds, so they can move God Valley anywhere they need as a weapon of mass destruction. However, I do believe there is more to the Mother Flame than simply creating flame clouds. The Harley begins with, "Within the earth there was fire. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun." We also see a bunch of people going underground and bringing back some sort of resource. This is a pretty common storytelling trope. Man finally tunnels to the center of the earth or some other insane feat just to find some too-good-to-be-true resource, and it leads to ruin. It's about mankind's hubris leading to its downfall. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. In One Piece's case, it seems that the center of the planet is some sort of mini-sun, and I think this is what the Mother Flame is based off of. It is a recreation of the piece of sun that resides in the core of the planet. Now, one of the biggest things that pop out in this geocentric model in Ohara is just how big the Earth is. It shows the Earth being bigger than Jupiter, which is massive. Well, if the solar system was geocentric, the Earth would need to be this big in order to pull these other planets into its orbit. So yes, One Piece's Earth is huge, just like this model. However, I do think its size is a bit deceptive. What I think the weapon on God Valley does to actually change how the universe is structured is transfer this Mother Flame substance between the cores of different planets. Emu used God Valley to take some of that energy from the other planets and the sun, and bring it to the core of the Earth, essentially inflating the Earth to make it large enough to catch these 5 inner planets into its orbit, with the outer 3 planets acting almost like a counterweight to the sun. This is why I said the size of the Earth is a bit deceptive in this model. Emu may have made the other planets, and potentially the sun, smaller in order to make the Earth bigger, so their Jupiter may be smaller than ours. Blackbeard's will of dusk will be to make the moon large enough to catch the Earth and the other planets into its orbit. The weapon also likely can use the Mother Flame to power itself. This is why the government was able to activate part of it to destroy Lelouja after stealing a piece of Vegapunk's Mother Flame. However, I believe in order to transfer this substance between planets, you need to use their Celestial Incarnations somehow. So in order for Luffy to make the universe heliocentric again, he will need the cooperation of one of each of these incarnations. Now by the end of the series, God Valley will be made whole again, and end up directly above Mary Joie in order to destroy it. After Roger found the One Piece, he mentioned that they were too early, and I believe there are at least 3 reasons for this. 1, he had to wait for the new incarnations of these planets to be born. 2, he needed to wait until God Valley was located above Mary Joie. And 3, he needed to wait for the planets to align. If the planets were to change orbit in the locations pictured here, they would need to move massive distances. The only time you can manipulate all these planets at once is when the planets are aligned. When Luffy activates the weapon on God Valley, a giant beam of cosmic energy will surge through all of these celestial bodies, redistributing this Mother Flame substance between the planets until they are heliocentric again, while destroying Mary Joie and likely Reverse Mountain at the same time, collapsing the red line and creating the all blue. The giant hole in Eni's lobby may be the site where Imu originally used this weapon to make the solar system geocentric, as he wanted to preserve the red line and the Holy Land. He then flooded the planet to more easily control a world segmented by the red line and the Grand Line. Now I'd like to show everyone how Oda, in some form or another, introduced all 11 of these celestial bodies by the time of Skypiea, then used Skypiea as both a meta-narrative of the entire series and to foreshadow the end of the series. Now the obvious starting point is Chapter 1, when Luffy, the Sun, is introduced. The chapter's called Romance Dawn, it takes place on Dawn Island, Dawn is what the D really means, the dawn of the world is the One Piece, and from the very beginning Luffy's straw hat evokes the image of a sun on the horizon, Dawn. Luffy was always meant to be a sun god, so technically the first chapter is where this begins. However, Oda used a specific part of the story to truly lay the groundwork for the cosmic elements of the One Piece, the first half of Paradise, from Reverse Mountain to Skypiea, where he introduced all of the Celestial Incarnations in some form or another. In Reverse Mountain, we are introduced to the Neptunians, the weapon part of Poseidon. Shirahoshi wasn't introduced until Fishman Island, but the Neptunians were introduced much earlier. And this is how Oda introduced the planet Neptune into the story. Oda also introduced Vivi in Reverse Mountain, introducing the Earth into the story. We then skip to Alabasta, where we get the introduction of Pluton, where it becomes a recurring plot point going forward, introducing Pluto into the story. This is also where Vivi first awakens her celestial earth powers, summoning the rain at the end of Alabasta. In Jaya, Oda introduces us to the Gorosei, the 5 inner planets. While some older translations translated Gorosei as the 5 elder stars, the most accurate translation of Gorosei is the 5 elder celestial bodies, which can be planets. Their connection to space right after the introduction of Pluton is not coincidental. They were always meant to symbolize Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. We also got the introduction of Blackbeard in Jaya, the moon. Finally, in Skypiea, we are introduced to the giant snake, a Uranian, introducing Uranus. This was also the arc with heavy ties to sun gods and sun imagery, and both Jaya and Skypiea, one island split in 2, featured the first appearances of the Nika pose. Oda introduced all the planets, then used the talk of sun gods and the Nika pose to hammer the point home, in the part of the story that, because it is a meta-narrative, has heavy foreshadowing towards the end of the series. That being said, despite Enel being an obvious allusion to the Celestial Dragons and Emu, I do not think Emu will be the final villain. One of the biggest parts of Skypiea that made it a meta-narrative is that Luffy fulfilled an ancient will, the will of Noland and Kalgara. This will be mirrored at the end of the series, with Luffy going to a sky island, God Valley, and fulfilling another ancient will, the Will of D. Earlier I showed the connections between Jaya and God Valley. They were both islands split in half remaining in the ocean, the other half in the sky. Now let's go back to the end of Jaya. Blackbeard was after Luffy's bounty and caught up to him moments before the knock-up stream erupted, launching Luffy to Skypiea, while leaving Blackbeard stranded below. I'd like to go over what Van Augur says here. This world is one big, endlessly turning wheel. If our will is strong enough, we'll meet them again. Oda is talking to the reader about the Will of D and the end of the story here, because the mirror of this moment is going to be both Luffy's crew and Blackbeard's crew going up to that sky island to determine what the Will of D truly means. I personally believe that Emu and the world government will be defeated the arc before God Valley, Mary Joie, to focus on the battle between Luffy and Blackbeard for their visions of the future. God Valley is going to be focused on the Will of D because the weapon that can fulfill the Will of D is located on it. We as the readers will know that Emu's era of geocentrism is coming to a close. The real question will be whether Luffy's or Blackbeard's interpretation of the Will of D will be the new era, especially since God Valley was the site of Roger and Rox's final fight. Now Enel obviously is a stand-in for Emu, which is why Skypiea is a meta-narrative on the whole series rather than just God Valley. He represents Luffy overturning the status quo in general, but Enel's main goal the whole time was to reach the moon, which in this case is Blackbeard. Now after Oda introduced all these figures into the story and set up Luffy as a sun god, Oda started building up the Void Century immediately after. At the end of the next arc, Long Ring Longland, Aokiji shows up and gives hints towards Robin's past. Then the next arc she leaves mysteriously and Pluton is brought up again as a major focus. Then we get the Ohara flashback during Enies Lobby. I'd like to go over a few panels from this flashback. The first mention of the Void Century and the panels preceding it. Here Clover says, "This library takes pride in storing the world's most important and most ancient knowledge. Under this tree of knowledge, fine archaeologists from every sea have gathered. There is no historical mystery that cannot be unraveled with the help of the documents found here." Clover says all this while having his arms outstretched, showcasing this geocentric model of the solar system. And then a couple of panels later, we get the first mention of the Void Century. Previously, Robin had talked about learning the true history, but this is the first time the word void is used to describe it. As we learn, there is an entire century wiped from history. Now obviously Clover was talking about the entire library. There's a good chance they hadn't even put together that these planets should be orbiting the sun. Geocentrism was normal to them. However, this was Oda foreshadowing for the reader. We got the answer to the Void Century literally the same chapter it was first mentioned. Oda used the first half of Paradise to introduce the celestial bodies into the story, then used the second half to build up the Void Century, the world government as major villains, and introduce the celestial dragons. Oda also did something similar in the New World. The first half of the New World started setting up Joy Boy, which culminated in the Nika reveal. In the second half of the New World, Oda is simultaneously building up both Rox and Emu, which in the short term will culminate with the full God Valley flashback, and in the long term with the reveal of Davy Jones and what Emu did to the world, the geocentric universe. Now I'd like to talk about a symbol that has shown up a lot in One Piece. A symbol of the sun that I believe is most likely the symbol of the Ancient Kingdom. The first time we see it is during Drum Island, where it is shown as the flag of Alabasta, though it has also shown up in Skypiea, the Kozuki Crest, Bonnie's necklace, the Harley, and likely hidden in other places as well. It is always shown as a central circle surrounded by 8 other circles. It has been directly connected to Nika and is meant to resemble the cardinal and ordinal directions and the helm of a ship. I believe that both the Jolly Roger and World Government logo, a central figure with an X, and a central figure with a cross, were derived from this symbol. What I believe this symbol actually represents is the 8 planets, other than the Earth, orbiting the Sun. You can see this in its first appearance on the Alabasta flag. Most sun symbolism have the pointed ends facing outwards, representing sunlight emanating outwards from the sun. In this representation of the symbol, the rays of sunlight look like they are revolving around the sun, because these rays are actually meant to represent the 8 planets. This is why all the other representations of this symbol only use circles, which is strange compared to most depictions of the sun. There is a good chance Blackbeard already knows the true meaning of this symbol, which is part of the reason why his flag has this 8-ended bone pattern, with the 3 skulls representing how these planets can revolve around the Earth, the Sun, or the Moon. Now I'd like to go over what is most likely the most important number in all of One Piece, 11, and its connection to the Japanese word Hito. But to start, I need to explain exactly what Goro Owase is, and why Nika is represented by the number 29. Now the way Goro Owase works is that you take a word in Japanese, and see if you can essentially find numbers within the word from the Japanese, Chinese, or English ways to say those numbers. For example, this column is all the English numbers. 1, 2, 3. It's just how Japanese people pronounce 1, 2, 3. The other columns are the way to say these numbers in Japanese or Chinese. This is why Gomu is 56, Go is 5, Mu is 6. Now a Japanese reader sent in an SBS question where they noticed a pattern in the devil fruits of the crew at the time, which Yoda essentially confirms by being blatantly dodgy about the question. All of the devil fruits of the crew, from Luffy to Brook, each use 2 different digits from 1 to 10, with the only missing numbers being 2 and 9. When you add all of these numbers up, including the 29, you get 325, which can be read as San-ni Go, or Sunny Go. Kuma's devil fruit is the Nikyu fruit, which reads as 29. This is the reason there have been countless theories about Frankie or Vivi getting Kuma's fruit. It completes this pattern. However, I believe the true 29 that completes this pattern is Nika. Ni is 2 in Goro Owase, but Ka is nothing. However, there are multiple other things pointing to Nika being represented by 29. Nika is a Japanese onomatopoeia for a smile, connecting it to the smiling and laughing themes of the Will of D and Laugh Tale. The reason it's an onomatopoeia is because it is derived from the word Nico, which means a bright smile. Nika doesn't perfectly translate to 29, but Nico, the word it's derived from, does. Niku, the Japanese word for meat, also has a Goro Owase number of 29. Now, Luffy's love of meat was Oda playing off of a pre-established shonen trope, but was also there to hint this connection between Luffy, 29, and Nika. Kuma, the man who does have the 29 devil fruit that so many people thought would end up on the crew, worships Nika. And finally, when you flip the 56 of Gomu upside down, you get 29. The Nika fruit was always meant to be the other side of the Gomu fruit. Luffy was always meant to be a sun god, because fixing their solar system has been part of the One Piece from the beginning. Nika was not a retcon. Now what does all this have to do with 11? Oda used the number 11 as the framework for multiple different aspects of One Piece, from the 11 celestial bodies, to the devil fruits of the main character and the main villain, to the title of the series itself. The Japanese title of One Piece is Hito Tsunagi, and I'm going to break down the title and its possible readings so everyone gets a deeper understanding. Hito can mean both one and human. Tsunagi means to connect or join, as in pieces of something coming together. The first reading is the most obvious. Interpret Hito as one, and it means in one piece. All of the pieces coming together to form a whole. The second reading, if you interpret Hito as human, translates to something that is typically roughly translated as the rope linking all men. But I think the sentiment Oda is trying to express here is better translated as something like the ties that bind humanity. These two readings are why Oda puts so much emphasis on the world building and foreshadowing in One Piece. He wanted to tell the story of a journey around the world where you realize at the end that everything is connected. The third interpretation is Hitosu Nagi, which means one sea at peace, alluding to the end of the series when Luffy brings the dawn of the world and creates the All Blue, which is the One Piece, the title. Now, Oda associates the word Hito specifically with the number 11, because of its unique relationship with Goro Owase. Now let's look at the 1 and 10 rows here. Both he and Hito can be 1, while at the same time, To can be 10. You can interpret Hito as 11 in two different ways. First, he is 1 and To is 10, which when added equals 11. Second, you can also derive 1 twice from Hito, as both he and Hito, 2 ones, 11. Oda used Hito's relationship with the number 11 to tie various aspects of the series to the title itself. First off, to tie the treasure itself to the 11 celestial bodies, a crucial part of the One Piece. Second, he connected 11 with the Goro Owase readings of various things throughout the series. First, all of the names of Luffy's Devil Fruit. The Gomu Gomu no Mi. Gomu is 56. 5 plus 6 equals 11. The Hito Hito no Mi models Sun God Nika. Hito is, again, 1 plus 10 equals 11, while Nika is 29. 2 plus 9 equals 11. Next, the main devil fruit associated with Blackbeard, the Darkness Fruit. Yami is 83. 8 plus 3 equals 11. Next, the Thousand Sunny. Thousand Sunny Go is 1,325. 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 5 equals 11. And finally, though there may be more I haven't found, the full title of the series, Hitosu Nagi, 1,127. 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 7 equals 11. Now I know numerology is contentious because a lot of it is bunk, but Oda has been known to use numerology in One Piece constantly, and we already know he has tied things like devil fruits to Goro Owase. When it's all three names associated with the main character's fruit, the main villain's fruit, and the name of the ship, and the name of the series, it stops being coincidence and starts being a pattern. Now I'd like to go over the mythological beings I believe these celestial bodies represent and the power's connection to royal lineage, as they can possibly show us who these new incarnations are. The obvious answer is the Greco-Roman gods, because they are what the planets are named after, and that's mostly true. There is more to it though. Two of the ancient weapons are not exactly the names of their planets, Poseidon and Pluton instead of Neptune and Pluto. Oda obviously did this partially to hide this aspect of the One Piece, but at the same time, this also ties the ancient weapons deeper into this religion than if he had just named them after the planets. Crocodile also says Pluton is the name of a god of the dead, which lines up perfectly with Greek mythology. However, I believe Oda is combining Greco-Roman mythology with Japanese mythology, the Shinto religion, because the celestial bodies facilitate this perfectly. A big point of One Piece is that it's a journey around the world showcasing many different cultures. Sun gods are a prominent figure in many religions. Even Jesus has connections to the sun that Oda in turn connected to Nika. Nika will have elements of multiple different sun gods, but I am almost positive that when we get the full explanation of Nika's story, whether he was fictional or not, the allusions will mostly focus on Oda's home mythology. All 11 of these celestial bodies are named after Greco-Roman gods, except for the sun, the moon, and the earth. These three tie perfectly into the three major deities of the Shinto religion: Amaterasu, the sun god, Tsukuyomi, the moon god, and Susanoo, the god of sea and storms. Susanoo represents the earth directly because of its ties to water. The earth is mostly water, even more so on One Piece's planet. And as Vegapunk said, water is the mother of nature. It is the entire reason that life exists on Earth. This is why Vivi summoned rain in Alabasta, and more importantly, how Imu used these powers to flood the planet in the past. This is why I'm almost certain the focus will be on Shinto mythology in the end. Plenty of mythologies have sun and moon gods, but it is strange initially to tie the planet Earth to water instead of land, though it does make sense if you think about it. We already saw Vivi summon rain, and we know Imu likely had to do with the flood of the Void Century. The entire reason the Earth Incarnation has been characterized by this power is their connection to Susanoo, and hence Shintoism. Oda used the already existing structure of the Greco-Roman gods for the planets named after their gods, while tying it into his homeland's mythology for the sun, moon, and earth. Now, these celestial powers also have a strong connection to royal lineages and the voice of all things, though there is quite a bit of nuance here. We know Poseidon is always a mermaid princess, and the Neptunians talked about the meetings of sovereigns through the voice of all things. We also know Pluton is from Wano, that both Odin and Momo could hear the voice of all things, and that Zunesha used the voice of all things to talk to Momo in the same manner the Neptunians did to Shirahoshi. There is a definite connection to royal families. However, Luffy definitely has no semblance of growing up as royalty, though the ultimate point will be that he is the Pirate King. There is also a very common theme throughout One Piece: benevolent royalty being usurped by tyrants. In this case, the Gorosei usurping the powers of these planets. This is part of why they are depicted as yokai and various demons instead of the Greek gods they are named after. They are not the rightful rulers and are a perversion of these planets. You can also see this through their titles, which do not align with their Greek gods. Mars had more ties with war and agriculture, so he would make more sense as the godhead of justice, agriculture, or science and defense. But instead, he is the godhead of the environment. Mercury was the god of merchants, and would better fit as the godhead of finances, but he is the godhead of justice. All of the Dawn versions of these incarnations will be based on the Roman gods and the Shinto deities. The Dusk and World Government versions will be the corrupted versions of them. Now, I'm explaining all this to say, for the 5 inner planets, their counterparts on Luffy's side don't necessarily need to be royalty to be considered a celestial incarnation. They could just be ancestors of a royal family completely lost to time. Their powers stripped away from them until the Gorosei are themselves usurped. This is not the case, however, with the original ancient weapons, the 3 outer planets. In fact, Oda has made a clear distinction with them. The planets represented by these 3 weapons are not in Earth's direct orbit. These planets either continuing to orbit the sun, or possibly creating a counterweight to the sun depending on how this geocentric model operates. This is represented in story by the 3 ancient weapons remaining outside of the government's control. They were not usurped like the 5 inner planets, and the biggest reason the government wants the ancient weapons may be to add these planets to the Earth's orbit during the next Great Cleansing. But more importantly, Oda also alluded to this through these kingdoms being isolated from the rest of the world and their tenuous relationships with the world government. Fishman Island is located deep under the sea, cut off from the rest of the world. It was also not part of the world government for 600 years. They technically joined 200 years ago, but even now the world government does not protect them. They remain under Luffy's, the Sun's, protection, like Whitebeard protected them before him. Wano is a kingdom known for its isolationism and not being part of the world government, and the Kazuki clan are the Pluton lineage. I believe Uranus will also follow this pattern, a royal family from a kingdom cut off from the rest of the world with tenuous or non-existent ties to the world government, which is why I believe Uranus is most likely Boa. Finally, this is highly speculative, but I think there's a way to bypass all of this royal lineage stuff completely through certain devil fruits. We know Zoan fruits have a will of their own, and the most common trope involving deals with the devil is that you wager your soul. I think devil fruits may take a piece of their owner's soul, and their souls live on in a way through the fruit. So there's a piece of Ace within Sabo, and likely a piece of Joy Boy within Luffy. I say this because it may be possible to bypass this connection to royalty if you eat a devil fruit that a Celestial Incarnation in the past has also eaten. You carry a piece of their soul, allowing you to bypass this restriction. This is why Blackbeard has been hunting specific devil fruits like Boas. He knows which devil fruits he needs to make his crew these Celestial Incarnations. Luffy himself might have even used this unknowingly. Roger definitely heard the voice of all things and likely was the son of his time. It's possible that Ace's lineage was the true Joy Boy lineage, but the fruit ultimately went to Luffy, which gave Luffy a piece of Joy Boy's soul. However, I do think when it comes to the Sun, Moon, and Earth, just being a D-Clan member might be enough to make you an incarnation, especially since all of the Ds in the story are likely the descendants of the Sun, Moon, and Earth of Joy Boy's time anyway. Now this next section is going to go over who I believe these Celestial Incarnations are, based on if they're on the side of Dawn, Dusk, or the world government. Now I do not have a clear idea on who most of the Celestial Incarnations are on the side of Dusk, especially because Blackbeard will likely use the Devil Fruit loophole to accomplish this, and may not need all the planets. Now, full disclosure, I believe that both Luffy and Blackbeard will have 31 crewmates by the end of the series, leading to a massive confrontation of all the heroes and villains the series has built up, and that all of these Celestial Incarnations will join their crews to symbolize them orbiting the Sun or Moon respectively. You don't necessarily have to believe that theory to believe this theory. You could just interpret these characters as simply being on Luffy and Blackbeard's sides, but I may refer to these characters joining their crews. I know that theory sounds a little ridiculous to many people, but honestly don't take my word for it. Take the word of all these comments saying it's the greatest theory they've ever heard. I hope by this point in the video you trust that I know what I am talking about. Please watch my 31 crewmates video. I would not believe this if I did not have a massive amount to back it up. Now I'm going to start with the 3 celestial bodies tied to the Will of D: the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth. These will all be Will of D members because they are the celestial bodies involved in Dawn and Dusk. Luffy as the Sun on the side of Dawn is confirmed, so we can move from that to the Sun God on Dusk's side, Loki. I now believe that Loki is a very important character that Oda has been saving for Elbaf since the very beginning of the series, as a counterpart to Luffy. First, let's get the D-Clan part out of the way. The nation of Elbaf idolizes Nika, so it would make complete sense for the royal family to openly or secretly be D-Clan members, like the Nefertari family. Now Loki introduced himself as a sun god who will bring the world to its end. Oda has shown him in the same laughing pose of Gear 5th's reveal, in the same chapter where the giants were talking about all the different ways people interpret Nika. Loki is the god of destruction to Luffy's god of liberation. The god of laughter part is a middle ground interpretation that could mean either of them. This is even apparent in their names. Luffy, Loki. This is why I believe Oda has had Loki planned since the beginning. Loki may be the reason Luffy has his name in the first place. Loki is a name that has existed for hundreds of years, while Luffy is a made-up name, even in Japanese. Luffing is a sailing term, but why add the Y? One Piece was heavily inspired by Vikings. The plan was to always make the trickster god Loki the evil sun god opposite the main character. The Will of D has been around since Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Romance Dawn. It takes place on Dawn Island. Oda has had the Dawn and Dusk duality in mind since the beginning, and he chose the trickster god of Norse mythology as the dusk version of Luffy because it also ties into the laughing and smiling themes of the Will of D. Now, many fans have taken the figure that seems to be Loki on the Harley mural to mean that Loki will ally himself with Luffy or join his crew. The Harley is meant to be cryptic and vague. There are many ways to interpret this without Loki joining Luffy. For one, the figure is crossing weapons with Luffy. This could symbolize these two figures competing with each other for this sun god position. And two, the giant shadowy figure to the left of the Harley looks very similar to what Loki would look like under the effects of Domi Reversi. When the giants were turned into these demons, they grew horns and wings and became much larger. Loki is already larger than most giants. If he were put under Domi Reversi, you would grow to be about the size of that shadowy figure on the Harley, with the sun in his hands representing that he is also a sun god. If this is the case, that figure that seems to be Loki is actually someone else. Loki's hair is more flowing than spiky. This giant's hair seems more like Skopper's. I think this figure may be Colin, Skopper's son, aged up by Bonnie's fruit. It could also be both. As we will go over later, the Harley is the king of double meanings. The three worlds that are spoken of in the Harley mirror the three worlds of Elbaf. The Harley is obviously meant to show the end of the series, when Luffy raids Mary Joie, but it also may foreshadow events in Elbaf at the same time. In the context of Elbaf, the tree is the Atom Tree, the giant next to Nika is Loki, and they're fighting against the Shadow, which is Emu and the Domi Reversi giants. In the context of the end of the series, though, the tree is the Eve Tree, and the Shadow is Loki under the effects of Domi Reversi, whether unwillingly by Emu, or willingly if Blackbeard gets these powers. This series is heavily inspired by Vikings. Oda named him Loki for a reason, and just about every depiction of Loki I can think of depicts him as a destructive trickster and a liar. Not every single thing out of his mouth will be a lie, but Oda has already brought his credibility into question. Loki will likely have a sympathetic backstory and admirable qualities, but he is not a good guy. Everyone except Luffy has reaffirmed this time and again. One of Luffy's biggest character traits is that he is extremely naive. Luffy unwittingly feels a kinship to Loki because they are both sun gods. There are similarities between them, but both Luffy and the readers are being played. And I can almost guarantee you that when he finally tells Luffy Shanks' location, it will lead Luffy right to Shamrock. Do not trust Loki, or any expectation Oda is setting up for him. Oda might even go as far as having Loki join the crew temporarily, but I believe the next arc is full-led, and Loki's allegiances will shift once he meets Blackbeard. Loki idolized rocks, whose will was inherited by Blackbeard. Loki's values and goals are much more in line with Blackbeard's than Luffy's. Now, in my 31 crewmates video, I explained that the last time Blackbeard gained a devil fruit, he gained 5 more crewmates, and that when Blackbeard gets his 3rd devil fruit, he will gain 5 more crewmates, reuniting the Rocks Pirates. Kaido, Big Mom, Weevil as a stand-in for Whitebeard, and Stussy as a stand-in for Buckin would join Blackbeard, along with a 5th crewmate. Before I said the 5th crewmate to join Blackbeard would be an odd man out like Shiryu was with the other Impel Down inmates, another supernova to mirror Bonnie, either Caribou or Rouge. I now think it is much more likely this crewmate is Loki. Shiryu was connected to Impel Down, but was the former head jailer and wasn't part of Blackbeard's battle royale like the others. Loki is connected to Rocks, but was not actually one of his crew. Loki also fits much better next to more intimidating figures like Kaido and Big Mom, and his idolization of Rocks is going to lead to a moment like Shiryu had with Blackbeard. Genuine admiration for Blackbeard like Loki had for Rocks. Now, I do think Luffy and Loki will fight at some point, but most of the time Luffy is going to be busy fighting Blackbeard. And then you can see that Bonnie is also a counterpart to Loki. They both idolize Nika. Bonnie idolizes Luffy while Loki will idolize Blackbeard. And Bonnie is actually the perfect person to fight Loki. Not only does she essentially already have Nika's powers, so she can grow giant, but her powers can turn Loki to his child form, massively undercutting his size advantage. Now when it comes to their mythological representations, Luffy is Amaterasu, the Shinto sun god. And while Loki's representation may just be Loki, there is another figure from Norse mythology I think Loki will have ties to: Surtur. Surtur is a fire giant that is said to burn down the World Tree during Ragnarok. We have already seen Loki burn part of the Atom Tree, and I think it is very likely he will burn down either the Atom Tree, the Eve Tree, or both. I am more leaning towards him only burning down the Eve Tree, because Luffy will have to destroy Mary Joie anyway, and I don't think Oda is going to deprive the giants of their home, but I could be wrong. I think this connection with Surtur will also show through his devil fruit, making him truly look like a fire giant. The nation of Elbaf worships Nika. It would make sense that the devil fruit passed down the royal line is connected to this sun god image, and would reinforce the idea in Loki's head that he truly is the sun god. Maybe it just engulfs him in flames, maybe it lets him create mini suns like on the Harley. But I think this will reinforce this fire giant and Surtur connection. Now finally, I'd like to talk about Sabo. While Luffy as the captain definitely is the sun god, Luffy will also have a crewmate that represents the sun. Sabo has the powers that you think a sun god would have: fire. He is an honorary D-Clan member, and he was the very first crewmate Luffy met before his journey even began, on Dawn Island. On top of that, if I am right about the soul aspect of devil fruits, Roger could hear the voice of all things, and Sabo has a piece of his sun's soul inside of him, meaning he may also literally be a candidate for this sun god position. If this is true, I think it is likely that at the end of the series, Luffy will be busy fighting Blackbeard, and Sabo will have to activate the weapon on God Valley with the other Celestial Incarnations in Luffy's stead. Now moving on to the Dawn version of the moon. This is definitely Law. Luffy's hat is meant to symbolize the sun on the horizon, while Law's hat is meant to symbolize the moon. More importantly than that, however, Luffy's and Law's backstories mirror each other to reinforce this sun-moon duality. Both Luffy and Law are D-Clan members that had former Celestial Dragons as their mentors, who were the reason they got their devil fruits, and both their mentors sacrificed something to save them. This is also why Oda made Law a D-Clan member and made his goal understanding the will of D. Once he learns what all this means, he will understand that his place is as the incarnation of the moon under Luffy's version of the will of D. Oda also uses this sun-moon duality in a more antagonistic way when it comes to the dusk version of the moon, Blackbeard. Just like Oda made an incarnation of the sun the captain of the Dawn faction, he made an incarnation of the moon the captain of the Dusk faction, to symbolize heliocentrism versus lunarcentrism. Oda made their opposing natures very apparent in their first encounter, and hinted at this with the picture of Blackbeard as a child prominently displaying the moon. This is also why Oda made Blackbeard the one to destroy Law's crew. It was the Dusk Moon trying to take out the Dawn Moon, whether Blackbeard knew it or not. Law survived this because he eventually will be the one to take this mantle at the end of the series, though. Now, Law represents the moon god Tsukuyomi, while I believe Blackbeard will be represented by the 8-headed snake from Shinto mythology, Orochi, and I also believe he will get the Orochi fruit to solidify this connection. In Shinto mythology, Orochi is killed by Susanoo, the god of sea and storms. However, Luffy is definitely going to be the one that defeats Blackbeard. I think this will be a more metaphorical interpretation, with Blackbeard being sent to the bottom of the sea in an allusion to Davy Jones' locker. Figurlin Garling is the representation of the moon under the world government. His hair is literally the moon. Oda couldn't make it more obvious. There also appears to be a large moon orbiting one of these planets in the geocentric model. If this is Saturn, then it makes sense that Garling will have a connection to one of Saturn's moons since he replaced Saturn on the Gorosei. One of Saturn's moons is named after Fenrir from Norse mythology, so he may represent that. However, Saturn has over 200 moons, many named after mythological figures, so Oda has plenty of options. Regardless of whether or not he represents Saturn's moon or Earth's moon, he is the moon representative of the world government. Now, Vivi is the dawn version of Earth, and I'd like to start by reinforcing why her rain powers connect to both the Earth and Susanoo. Oda had very obvious and clear-cut representations for the sun and moon in Shinto mythology, but there was no Earth deity. Oda realized, though, that a god of sea and storms like Susanoo could very easily work as an analog of an Earth god. The Earth's surface is mostly water, and it is the reason life exists on Earth in the first place. And this would work even better in a pirate manga where the planet is even more covered in water than our own. This ability to summon water has the capacity to both give life and take it, as this is the power Imu used to flood the planet during the Void Century. Now, Imu's mythological figure is likely the Umibozu, a Japanese sea yokai that appears as a giant shadow on the water. Imu is Umi backwards, Japanese for sea, and this sea yokai is the perfect way to make a corrupted version of Susanoo. I also believe this shadowy figure is what people are truly seeing when they look at Imu. This is what Imu looks like when using their Umibozu powers. Now, I previously said it is likely that the dawn versions of the 5 inner planets do not have control of their powers because they were usurped by the Gorosei. So why does Vivi still have her Earth powers when Imu usurped the Earth? There have been conflicting hints towards Imu being both a man and a woman, because Imu is in a way both. Law's Devil Fruit is the most likely option for the source of Imu's immortality, and Doflamingo said the fruit was the key to the sacred treasure of Mary Joie. The sacred treasure is Imu. Doflamingo vaguely confirms here that the personality switching is what he's talking about. He explains Law's Devil Fruit is the key, then goes, not only the personality switching, but immortality on top of that. The personality switching is the reason it's the key. It lets you take control of the body with these Earth powers that have the potential to flood the entire planet. We know Law's Devil Fruit was likely the way Imu gained his immortality, and we know these powers reside in the Nefertari family because we have seen Vivi use them. In Joy Boy's time, Nefertari Lily had these powers. Imu was a man who accomplished exactly what Doflamingo was planning to do. Much like Doflamingo was a guy who accomplished what Crocodile was planning to do. Imu had one of his lackeys switch him into Nefertari Lily's body, and then made him immortal, giving him complete control of the Earth both literally and figuratively. Vivi still has her powers because they are technically still in the Nefertari bloodline, but the body is not being piloted by Lily, which is why Imu speaks as a man in Japanese. This is also shown in the kingdom's relationship to the world government, like the ancient weapon kingdoms. The Nefertari family were the only one of the 20 Alliance families to not become celestial dragons, yet they remain in the world government. The reason Lily never returned to Alabasta was because her body was taken over, and is now technically running the world government, while the rest of the Nefertari family remained in Alabasta. Imu needed Lily's powers for their plan to make this geocentric solar system and flood the world, but she betrayed them because she was an ally of Joy Boy. Maybe she grew to understand Joy Boy over time, maybe her father, the king, forced her into the 20 Kingdom Alliance, but she could not prevent Joy Boy's downfall, so she did what she could to preserve his will, the Will of Dawn, by scattering the Poneglyphs. Once Joy Boy and Davy Jones were out of the way, Imu was free to steal Lily's body to take possession of these powers, make the Earth the center of the solar system, and flood it, creating a segmented world that would be easier to control from atop the Holy Land, guarding the most likely option for the origin of devil fruits, Sunlight Tree Eve. The reason Imu is obsessed with kidnapping Vivi over anyone else, even the sun, is that Vivi has the potential to overthrow Imu in a way they can't, by using Imu's Earth powers against him, or potentially taking them away completely. Emu may also want to transfer into Vivi for a younger host. He may even be swapped by the time Luffy saves her, but Luffy will figure it out and Law can fix the problem. Now I'd also like to go over Emu's strange eyes. Back in Whiskey Peak, we saw Vivi wear an outfit with the same circular pattern, which she used to hypnotize enemies to induce vertigo. We can see Emu doing something similar with Gunko. When Gunko is first introduced, only one of her eyes is like Emu. When she starts to regain the memories of who she truly is, Oda does a close-up on that eye and makes it look like it's dissipating. The next panel, with Gunko running away and now in control of herself, Oda hides the eye that was like Emu's before. I believe in this moment that eye went back to normal. Then right after, both of her eyes become like Emu, and it is made clear that Emu is in full control. Emu's eyes allow him to use some sort of hypnosis with two different modes. When there's only one eye, it is sort of like autopilot. Do my bidding, but I won't take direct control of you. And when both eyes are transformed, that is when Emu takes complete hold of you. I don't necessarily think all characters with these eyes are under Emu's control, though maybe characters like Mihawk have just obtained the same ability. Now I do have a potential candidate for the Dusk version of Earth, Crocodile, but I will fully admit this is highly speculative. This ties into a theory I've had for a very long time that I simply see as a possibility. I'll start by talking about Robin, Miss All Sunday. We can tell that Oda knew she was going to join the crew instead of Vivi because in her introduction, Robin wears Luffy's straw hat, like Nami did in Arlong Park, and Robin's devil fruit fits the pattern I showed earlier. I say this because I think Oda has always had something more planned for Robin, even beyond her connection to the Void Century, something she shares with Crocodile, her former boss, a familial connection to Luffy. First, I believe Robin's father is Dragon, making her Luffy's half-sister. We know Robin's mother worked for a group that was researching the Void Century. That group was likely the Freedom Fighters, the group led by Dragon before the Revolutionaries. When Olvia hesitates to leave Robin behind, one of these Freedom Fighters says, "If you can't leave your child, don't come. We'll fulfill your husband's wishes." Her husband's wishes involved the Void Century. It would make sense that Dragon's wishes were the same, and the Freedom Fighters definitely would complete their leader's wishes regardless of Olvia's involvement. There's also Robin's black hair to Olvia's stark white. Oda made it obvious Robin did not get her hair color from her mother. The Revolutionaries have also been searching for Robin for years, and Dragon said to protect her at all costs. This obviously makes sense just from her knowing how to read the poneglyphs, but this adds another layer. Dragon trying to search for and protect his daughter. Dragon knows that if the world government were to ever find out he had children, they would instantly be used against him. He does not tell his best friends about his children. He does not tell his children they are his children. Though Robin may know this already because of her time in the Revolutionaries, and Oda is just waiting for Dragon's flashback to drop the bomb. Now how does Crocodile fit into all this? In Impel Down, Ivankov talks about knowing a secret of Crocodile's. There is a good chance Crocodile is trans, leading to the infamous Crocomom theory. I do not think Crocodile is Luffy's mom. However, I do think he may be Luffy's former aunt. Ivankov says they go way back, and that they knew each other when Crocodile was first starting out. It would make sense that Dragon's sibling would know Ivankov. I think Crocodile genuinely didn't like his family, thought Garp and Dragon were both crazy or stupid, and wanted out. So he asked Ivankov to change his sex and tell no one, so he could leave his familial ties and identity behind to follow his own ambition. This is also why Crocodile had zero issue with killing his nephew. To him, it was just cutting more familial ties that he had already severed. It may have even been a perk for him. This would be Oda using Baroque works to secretly introduce the readers to two members of Luffy's family. Oda did something similar in the East Blue. Garp and Dragon were both introduced very early in the series, but we didn't learn of their relation to Luffy for hundreds of chapters. This would be Oda doing this again in the beginning of Paradise with Robin and Crocodile, but saving the reveal until near the end of the series, Dragon's flashback. Now this is why I said it's speculative. The main thing that ties this together is that they all have black hair and look like they could be related. But this is simply something I think Oda could be building up to. However, this would make Crocodile a D-Clan member, and a possible candidate for the Dusk version of Earth against Vivi, tying this all back to Alabasta again. While Luffy is fighting Blackbeard, Vivi will face off against Crocodile, defeating not only the opposing version of Earth, but the person Luffy saved her from in Alabasta, showcasing her growth. This may sound ludicrous, until you realize Vivi's sea and storm powers are literally Crocodile's weakness. On top of that, like how Sabo and likely Loki's fruits fit closer to what you think a sun god's powers would be, Crocodile's sand powers are closer to what you think an earth god's powers would be over rain. Now moving on to the other planets, when it comes to both the outer and inner planets, I do not know who will be the Dusk version of these planets. The potential loophole with Devil Fruits make it so that any of these crewmates could be any planet really, so I'm going to be focusing on the Dawn version of these planets from here on out. Now we'll start with the original 3 ancient weapons, the 3 outer planets. As I said before, the commonality between all of the ancient weapons is that they are royalty from kingdoms from isolated nations with tenuous ties to the world government, and they all command giant beasts, the Uranians, Neptunians, and Plutonians. In Greco-Roman mythology, the brothers Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, also known as Jupiter, Pluto, and Neptune, were each given command over a different domain of the planet. Jupiter controlled the sky, Pluto controlled the land, and Neptune controlled the sea. This land, sea, and sky trio is what Oda used as the basis for the outer planets' powers. They would control the giant beasts of these 3 domains. Oda replaced Jupiter with Uranus because Oda didn't choose the order or names of the planets. He needed them specifically to be the last 3 planets in the solar system for this geocentric model to work. Oda saw, however, that Uranus is the primordial god of the sky and is implied to be the sky itself, making him the perfect substitute for the sky domain. Now Neptune is confirmed as Shirahoshi, so we can move on to Pluto, Momo. Now it's confirmed that Pluton is from Wano, and Momo is from the royal family of Wano. Both him and his father could hear the voice of all things, and Zunesha, a Plutonian, spoke to Momo through the voice of all things, like the Neptunians did to Shirahoshi. The Pluton under Wano that is currently slumbering is another Plutonian for Momo to control, likely a mole. The giant port under Wano is called Mogura Port, which is Japanese for mole. It's likely that this Plutonian dug this port in the past. This mole would also be able to dig deep enough into the crust of the earth to open lava pockets, giving it the power to both destroy islands while also creating new land masses. This is why Frankie was shocked and exclaimed, "Can humans really build this?" when looking at the Pluton blueprints, and why Tom called it a beast. It is mimicking something biological that can open massive pockets of magma. It is also possible that the blueprints could build something similar to Laboon, a large animal with mechanized elements within, making Plutonians cyborgs essentially, with people being able to ride within them like a battleship, like Gadatsu did to this mole in this cover story. Now with Pluton, we have a clear direct link to the royal family because we know for sure Pluton is from Wano. For Uranus, there is a lot more possibilities on which royal line it could be. Essentially, anyone who is considered royalty that is from an isolated country could be Uranus. I believe the most likely option is Boa. However, some other options are Carrot, Yamato, or Mancherry. I am mainly going with Boa because she is the only one of these characters I have found a clear link to an aspect of Uranus. Boa is connected to snakes, and already has a snake companion. Her commanding a giant snake, a Uranian, would be an extension of this. The giant snakes that pull her ship even look like they could be Uranians. Moving on to the 5 inner planets, we have confirmation on all the world government reps, and there are plenty of videos going over the demons they represent, so I will just be going over who I believe the Dawn candidates could be. Note that because these positions have been usurped by the Gorosei, they do not necessarily have to currently be royalty to be these planets. Their kingdoms may have been wiped out long ago. I mainly base this on how their personalities line up with the gods. However, I will bring up any ties to royalty that any of these candidates have. Now I am certain Bonnie is Saturn, but I've brought up 2 potential options for each of the others. I think there is a very good chance that these 5 inner planets are the original 4 crewmates, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji, with Bonnie added in. However, Oda may have even given himself multiple options for who these other planets are so he can decide when the time is right who is who. First, Nami or Buggy as Mercury. Mercury, or Hermes, is a god of finance and commerce. For Nami, this would be the reason why Oda made her relationship with money such an important part of her character. He exaggerated her greed and made it a prominent part of her backstory to tie into Mercury. For Buggy, for much of the series his primary motivation was to get rich by finding Captain John's treasure, and he also runs a successful business, Buggy's Delivery. Next, Sanji or Boa as Venus. Venus, or Aphrodite, is a goddess of love. For Sanji, Oda chose to manifest this in his relationship with women. This is the reason Oda chose to play up his chivalry and outright simping. Oda constantly gives him literal hard eyes when interacting with women. He is the embodiment of love and could literally never physically hurt a woman. However, there is another layer to this. Venus is a goddess of love, and I believe Sanji in some way or another will become a woman. Now I am not saying Nami has to become a man because she's Mercury, but with Sanji there is quite a bit of evidence that he is transgender to some capacity. One of the things Oda has constantly done to Sanji is confront and question him about his self-image. Oda typically does this with his bounty posters, but he's also done it with the way Sanji presents himself, either by making him dress in drag, or by making him wear his raid suit despite his hatred of Germa. During the time skip, Sanji learned the 99 vital recipes, which Ivankov states are part of bride training, and that to learn them you need the heart of a maiden, and to learn Nukama Kenpo. Now Ivankov did give Sanji a bit of an out, but despite Sanji's grandstanding, he learned the recipes. He has the heart of a maiden, and likely learned some Nukama Kenpo from these masters. Now we have not seen Sanji use any Nukama Kenpo because it's a fighting style that would likely involve him wearing heels. And remember, his entire fighting style revolves around kicking, so heels would actually work really well for him. I think there will be a moment in the future like when Sanji was forced to wear his Germa suit, except this time he will be forced to dress in drag because he needs to use his Nukama Kenpo. Now Oda may just leave it there and that would be enough for Sanji to be a goddess of love. However, I do think there is a strong possibility Ivankov will just straight up turn Sanji into Sanju, if we're going by Germa's naming conventions. Oda also played with Sanji's identity a bit by putting him in Nami's body, and he seemed way happier in a woman's body. Maybe this is the only way Sanji can truly love himself and get over his identity issues. Oda questioning his identity this whole series may be leading Sanji to the realization that he's better off as a woman. Oda also loves confronting Sanji with women who are trying to kill him. There may be a situation where he literally has no choice but to hit a woman, and realizes he can only hit a woman as a woman. Either way, I believe the reason Oda is playing with Sanji's gender identity is because he is building him up as the goddess of love. Sanji is also royalty from a kingdom that lost its land, and was a long-standing member of the world government, but lost its status after the incident in Whole Cake. I think this might be a hint that he is one of the inner planets. He is royalty that used to be under the world government, but isn't anymore. Now I also have to mention Boa here because she does genuinely fit the description of a love goddess very well. She's known as the most beautiful woman in the world, her powers revolve around love, and she's in love with the main character. However, her kingdom's relationship with the government is much closer in line with the outer planets, an isolated yet still standing kingdom that has never been an official world government nation, like Wano, leading me to believe she is more likely Uranus. Sanji's connection to love has been much more focused on than Boa's anyway throughout the series. I think Sanji fits a bit better than Boa. Next, Zoro or Kid as Mars. Mars, or Ares, is a god of war. For Zoro, this is simple. He is the strongest crewmate and always will be, as his dream is combat-focused unlike the other Straw Hats. Zoro will be the greatest swordsman in the world and the second most powerful crewmate after Luffy at the end of the series. Zoro is also not royalty, but he is nobility. He is part of the Shimotsuki clan, who were daimyo under the Kozuki. For Kid, this would simply fit in with his overall chaotic and violent nature, and his red hair might literally be there as a connection to the Red Planet. Next, Usopp or Yamato as Jupiter. Jupiter, or Zeus, is a god of thunder. However, the aspect of Zeus that I think will be the biggest connection to both of these crewmates is their relationships to their fathers. Zeus is known for rebelling against and taking down their own father, Cronus. For Usopp, his relationship with his father that he's never even met is something that has been built up as an important part of his character from the beginning. Usopp taking down his father would likely be more friendly in nature though, Usopp proving that he's a better marksman than his father. It may also be important to note that Usopp was the one who originally built Nami's Climatact, which can create lightning. Now the Norse god Thor is also a god of thunder, who wielded a hammer like Usopp occasionally does. So if we see Oda making connections between Usopp and Thor in Elbaf, we can make this connection to Jupiter a lot easier. For Yamato, Yamato's father really is a tyrant like Cronus, and Yamato actually did rebel against his father and fight him one-on-one, though the final battle was obviously saved for Luffy. Yamato is also technically royalty, though like the other inner planets it's a weird situation. He was briefly declared Shonin of New Onigashima right after Kaido overthrew Orochi, making him officially royalty for a short time instead of just an epithet. We also do not know the history of the Oni yet. The reason Yamato was called the Oni Princess may be because Kaido's family was Oni royalty in the past. Finally, we have Saturn, who I am sure is Bonnie. Saturn, a Roman conflation of the Greek gods Cronus and Kronos, is a god of time. Bonnie's devil fruit powers, once again, aren't initially what you would think a time god's powers would be, like time travel or freezing time, but her powers still fit. Bonnie had the Sapphire Scale Disease, a gem associated with Saturn, and her backstory was intricately tied to Saint Saturn. Bonnie also has strange ties to royalty. Her father was a king, but only a figurehead, and their country was once part of the world government, but only part of it was. She also has celestial dragon blood, and she does not necessarily need to be Saint Saturn's daughter to be part of the J. Garcia family. Like Zeus was known for taking down his father, Cronus, Cronus also took down his father, Uranus, while Bonnie will help take down the celestial dragons and likely her biological father too. Now that we have gone over everything, this final section is going to be about the Harley, but the very end is going to go over how Oda could potentially take the ending of One Piece to a level beyond heliocentrism. I'm going to go over all these different worlds and try to show you how both the Earth and the solar system shifted throughout these time periods. I'm also going to link Arthur's translation of the Harley in the description, because there will be certain parts where I go over the Japanese text. As I said earlier, the Harley is meant to be cryptic and vague. I believe many of these lines have double meanings, which is why Saul emphasized that there are so many interpretations of it. Multiple interpretations are going to be right simultaneously. To put everything in context before we begin, Right before we see the mural in the text, we are told that it is believed that the current world of One Piece is the third world. And we were told earlier that the world has been destroyed twice. Now we'll start with the first world. The first world was heliocentric, and it may even be our planet Earth based on the architecture shown here. The first line we went over earlier. Within the Earth there was fire. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun. The people of that era mined this mother flame substance from the core of the Earth until they brought the world to near ruin. The next line is, the enslaved prayed, and the sun god appeared. The simple interpretation is that the Celestial Incarnations always existed on Earth, and the sun incarnation simply came to liberate these slaves. The more complex interpretation is that aliens or literal gods from the sun, moon, and/or other planets came to Earth in order to help the situation. At some point during either the first or second world, there was a mass migration to the Earth by at least aliens from the moon. If aliens from all the other planets came here as well, that would explain how the other Celestial Incarnations got to Earth, and how all of the many different races of the One Piece world came together. They were initially aliens. I think the mass migration happened during the second world for reasons I'll go over then, but aliens likely did come to Earth during the first world as well. Maybe the destruction of Earth would have caused a major disruption in the solar system, so they had no choice but to come and help. This is when the weapon on God Valley was first built, in an effort to replenish the miniature sun within the Earth by siphoning the mother flame from the other planet's cores, or the sun. I do not think the solar system became geocentric right here because of a line in the second world I'll go over in a minute, but I very well may be wrong about that. They fixed the problem though, and may have even inflated the Earth a bit, just not large enough to catch the other planets into its orbit. However, the next line does seem to imply that this is when the red line came into existence. The Earth God raged, and with its serpent of hellfire, shrouded the world in death and darkness. Back in Little Garden, Dory said, "Only the great serpent soaked in blood can withstand our attacks." He is talking about the red line here, while also being a reference to Jormungandr, the giant sea serpent that wraps around the entire world in Norse mythology. The red line circles the entire planet, while the soaked in blood part is to evoke the red imagery. Dory was saying that only the red line can withstand their attacks. This serpent of hellfire also evokes the image of a giant red serpent, and it shrouded the world, which you could interpret as the red line encompassing the Earth, though there is a deeper meaning I'll explain in a moment. Now I'd like to go over the term Earth God here. In Skypiea, all 4 of the gods mentioned in the Harley are also mentioned, except that 2 of them use a variation of their titles in Japanese. The term Earth God is slightly different between the 2, and the Sea God of the Harley is a modified version of the Rain God from Skypiea. I think it's because both of these gods can refer to 2 different incarnations. In Skypiea, this god is called God of the Great Earth. In the Harley, it is simply the Earth God. Just like the English word for Earth, the word used here in Japanese can refer to both the planet Earth or just land in general. This Earth God could refer to either the incarnation of Earth or Pluton, who commands the Earth Kings. Or it could be a double entendre to refer to both. In the context of Pluton, it would refer to Pluton commanding a mole like the one beneath Wano to open lava pockets around the world, creating the landmass that became the Red Line. In the context of the planet Earth, if the Earth incarnation was the ruler of the planet at the time, like Imu is now, they were likely a tyrant. There were enslaved people and the Earth was being overmined, but they were deposed by the Sun incarnation and raged. Now once again, it would make a lot of sense for the Earth to become large enough to make the solar system geocentric during the advent of the Red Line. This line may also be referring to that. If the solar system did become geocentric here, the Earth God raging is also about the Earth enlarging enough to catch the other planets into its orbit, potentially opening the lava pockets that created the Red Line. I am personally leaning towards it being a double or even triple entendre. The Earth did get larger, but not enough for geocentrism, and the Earth incarnation raged after being deposed, then commanded the Pluto incarnation to create the Red Line in a bid to retain control. Now the first interpretation of the shrouded the world in death and darkness line is the shadow of the newly formed red line stretching across the entire planet, with its height even more pronounced before Emu flooded the planet. The second meaning of the shrouded in death and darkness line is about the fallout of this scenario, something I believe was called the Empty Millennium, a mirror of the Void Century. The chapter that Cricket explains all he knows about Sky Islands is where Oda explains all of this. Cricket explains that the mass of clouds that create Skypiea is like a fossilized cloud. It has existed for a long time and completely blots out the sun. Later, in Skypiea, we find out these island and sea clouds are created when erupting volcanoes hurl volcanic particles into the sky. When the red line was created by causing all of these volcanic eruptions, it created sky islands around the world, and the combination of them with all the ash blown into the sky shrouded the world in darkness. Cricket's explanation of the knock-up stream erupting water because of geothermal heat in the same chapter is directly foreshadowing this. The Empty Millennium was the creation of the Red Line, where mass volcanic eruptions covered the world with island clouds and rained ash, covering the world in darkness for 1,000 years. The Void Century was the creation of the Grand Line, when Emu covered the world with rain clouds and flooded the planet, covering the world in darkness for 100 years. The final line of the first world reads, "And they will never meet." This line is repeated at the end of the second world, and juxtaposed at the end of the third as, "And they will surely meet." The word "they" here in Japanese seems to refer to a group of people, as it is strange in Japanese to use this word to refer to just two people. My initial thought was that this is what the Neptunians were referring to when they were talking about the meetings of sovereigns, but they were referring specifically to two people. The Neptunians were likely talking about the promise between Joy Boy and the Poseidon of his era, which I believe was to bring Fishman Island to the surface. However, unless there was more than just two people involved in this promise, and it extends way before Joy Boy into the first world, I doubt this is what this line is referring to. Now, it's hard to glean much from these lines, especially because we have no idea why they had to meet, just that they didn't, but they will. My best guess is that this is referring to all of the Celestial Incarnations as a whole not being unified as a group. In the first world, the Earth Incarnation and likely Pluton were against the Sun Incarnation. In the second world, Joy Boy likely made allies with all these incarnations, but in the end, Emu ended up usurping the Earth and the 5 inner planets. By the end of the third world, "They will surely meet" means that all of these incarnations will be in harmony under Luffy as he makes the solar system whole. Now on to the second world. This was Joy Boy's era. It's hard to tell exactly how long this era lasted, but it was likely tens of thousands of years. Cricket explains that the mass of clouds that make Skypiea is thousands of years old. In Japanese, he actually says it may be tens of thousands of years old, and the Sky Islands were created at the end of the first world. Loki also says that the mountains on the lower level of Elbaf are tens of thousands of years old, and that this lower level is called the First World. They likely came into being during the transition from the First World to the Second. This is why I call it the Empty Millennium instead of the Empty Century. It seems that the time frame of the Second World was much longer than the Third's. I think the Second World is when most of the aliens settled on Earth. It's hard to imagine anything surviving on Earth after 1,000 years of darkness and raining ash. So maybe the aliens of the First World sheltered the surviving humans on their planets until Earth was inhabitable again. Once everything cleared up, this newly enlarged Earth had a lot more land, and these aliens came to settle this land along with the surviving humans, possibly due to problems on their home planets like with the moon races, and the Earth became a hub of sorts in the solar system. During these thousands of years, humanity rebuilt, and by Joy Boy's time they had found a way to recreate the Mother Flame, likely without siphoning it from the Earth's core, leading to this technologically advanced society. Now the first line of the second world reads, "Within the void there was breath." All three worlds start with a variation of, "Within the blank there was blank." Within the earth there was fire, within the void there was breath, within the chaos there was emptiness. The English translation does something weird though that I need to correct in order to explain things. The translator kind of swapped the void and emptiness lines from the second and third world from the Japanese version. When it says, within the void there was breath in the second world, the Japanese actually uses nothingness, a synonym of void, but a different word in Japanese than what is used to describe the void century. When it says, within the chaos there was emptiness in the third world, the Japanese actually uses the same word it uses for the void century. Because the English says emptiness, I'm going to assume that this is what the English translations will eventually end up using down the line. Empty millennium sounds better than nothing millennium anyway, though it could end up being something like the null millennium. I don't know why the translator swapped this, but it is important to understanding the timeline. The transition from the first to the second world was the empty millennium, the creation of the red line. The transition from the second to the third world was the void century, the creation of the grand line. Oda used nothingness to describe this time period because it was a synonym of void. The empty millennium was very similar to the void century, but there were some key differences. The next line in the second world is, the forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war. Now the word demon here in Japanese actually means devil. This is likely about the birth of devil fruits. Mars and Saturn have some ties to agriculture, so they kind of work as a forest god. But I think the most likely option is that the forest god is Venus, who has connections to gardens, as well as some connections to various flora and fauna. The first part of this line I think is referring to the incarnation of Venus planting and cultivating Sunlight Tree Eve, which bore devil fruits through some process or another. This likely happened long before Joy Boy was born, because Eve is a mangrove tree, and the fastest growing mangroves grow about 1 meter per year. The roots of Eve reach all the way down to Fishman Island, 10,000 meters below the sea, and that is after growing through the red line. Eve's roots are at least 10,000 meters deep, likely a lot more, which means it's been growing for at least 10,000 years, unless the Celestial Incarnations' powers sped up its growth somehow. As for the sun spread the fires of war part, this can either refer to Joy Boy fighting against the 20 Kingdom Alliance, or that the various sun incarnations throughout these tens of thousands of years traveled the world liberating countries from oppression similar to what Luffy has been doing this entire series. Luffy is considered a terrorist and has participated in multiple coups. You can easily interpret this as spreading the fires of war. This line could also be referring to the rediscovery of the Mother Flame leading to wars breaking out all over the world, as it is a miniature sun. The next line is, those of the half moon dreamed. Those of the moon dreamed. My personal guess is that the Half Moon people are the D clan, as you can interpret the D as half a sun or moon on the horizon, dawn or dusk. Maybe this line is specifically talking about the Dusk faction. The people of the moon I think are the Birkins at the least, who are confirmed aliens from the moon, though the Lunarians are also likely from the moon, and they seem to be allies of Joy Boy. This part is referring to one or all of these winged races from the moon. The next line is, man killed the sun and became God, and the sea god stormed. This line is the reason I believe the solar system was still heliocentric during the Second World. I think man killing the sun and becoming God is used in two different contexts here. In one sense, it is referring to the death of Joy Boy, the sun in his time, and Imu and the world government usurping the Earth incarnation and the 5 inner planets, becoming gods themselves. In the other sense, it is referring to the Earth becoming the focal point of the solar system, replacing or killing the sun. This is why I believe the Second World was still heliocentric. It wasn't until the Void Century and the advent of the Third World that the world government came into power, represented by the Gorosei centering around Imu. This would also be why they're called the Celestial Dragons who created the world. They literally reshaped the planet to accomplish their goals. I'm about 50-50 on this though. The Earth enlarging enough to make the solar system geocentric during the creation of the Red Line also makes a lot of sense. The Celestial Dragons creating the world could also just mean flooding the planet to create the oceans. There are arguments for both. Hey everyone, this is a post-production edit. Most of the audio for this video was recorded between 2 and 3 months ago, and I wanted to update this part of the video. I was not the one doing the video editing and I didn't want to put a wrench in the editing process, so I decided it was better to add this instead of re-recording older parts. When I first started writing this video, I truly thought Emu was the one to make the solar system geocentric. It wasn't until I wrote and was researching the Harley section that I started to doubt that, and by that point the other parts had already been sent to the editor. Now a few months later, I have changed my mind on the subject. Garling says here that he found something preposterous on God Valley, and that Emu would be very pleased with this information. This is likely the weapon on God Valley that I've been talking about for years now. If Emu had been the one to make the solar system geocentric, he likely would have known the weapon was on God Valley. Emu agreeing to host the Celestial Dragon's most dangerous game on God Valley at Garling's suggestion makes it seem to me that Emu did not know beforehand. There's a good chance he was aware of the weapon and had been looking for it, but he didn't know where it was hidden, so I doubt he was the one to use it. The second world was also geocentric. All Emu did between the second and third world was flood the planet. Now another thing that's been revealed in these couple months is that it's essentially been confirmed I was right about Davy Jones being the Dusk counterpart of Joy Boy. Joy Boy and Davy Jones were both born in the same era, found the weapon on God Valley like Garling did, and both hatched plots to turn the solar system from geocentric to heliocentric or lunar-centric. This was the birth of the wills of Dawn and Dusk. I know this changes the context of some of what I said earlier in the video. For example, the geocentric model in Ohara isn't necessarily revealing the secrets of the Void Century, it's revealing the secrets of its mirror, the Empty Millennium, as well as key aspects of the Will of D and the One Piece. I honestly didn't even know what the Empty Millennium was until all the other parts of this video were recorded and sent to the editor. I found out a lot more than I thought I would once I started researching the Harley. I did think Emu was responsible for the geocentrism when I recorded those earlier parts. Sorry for the confusion, I just didn't want to make an already lengthy editing process even longer. And with that, we can get back to the Harley and the rest of the video. Now when it comes to the sea god Stormed, the word translated as stormed is actually closer to rampaged in Japanese, and I believe that just like the earth god part in the first world, this line is referring to two people. This sea god is a variation of the rain god mentioned in Skypiea, and once again I believe it means two different celestial incarnations. Because of Susanoo's connections to seas and storms, this sea god could be referring to the earth incarnation, at this point Emu in Lily's body, but it could also be referring to Poseidon, who commands the Sea Kings. In one context, this part is about Emu using the earth incarnation powers to flood the world. In the other context, I think it means Poseidon being distraught at Joy Boy's death, and potentially sicking the Neptunians on Emu or Davy Jones, whoever killed Joy Boy. This may be how Davy Jones got sent to Davy Jones' locker, though Emu at least was safe atop the Red Line. The second world ends by repeating, and they will never meet, which I believe refers to Joy Boy's celestial alliance being broken up by the world government usurping the planets. Now on to the third world. This is the current world of One Piece, where the solar system is geocentric and the Earth is divided by the four blues, the Grand Line, and the Red Line. The first line reads, "Within the chaos there was emptiness." As I explained before, the word emptiness here is actually the same word used for the Void Century. In the same context as the first line of the second world, it likely refers to humanity rebuilding after 100 years of flooding. Though I do believe there is a deeper context here that we likely won't understand until we get more information. The next line is, "The inconvenient remnants recall the promised day and hear the voice of the half moon." The inconvenient remnants are the ancient weapons, the planets outside of world government control, and the other celestial incarnations realizing their roles in all this, and in turn usurping these planets from the world government. The Promised Day is the day that the incarnations under Dawn and Dusk bring down the world government, then fight to bring either the dawn or dusk of the world, with the Will of Dawn ultimately succeeding, destroying Mary Joie and bringing Fishman Island to the surface. Now the term half moon in this line is actually different in Japanese than the half moon used earlier. It's an archaic term for crescent moon. The half-moon people from earlier are likely the D clan, because a half-moon looks closer to a D than a crescent moon, while the crescent moon refers to the Kazuki clan, who have symbolism specifically tied to crescent moons. The Kazuki clan are the ones who forged the poneglyphs. The voice of the crescent moon is the Kazuki clan passing down the will of D through the poneglyphs, in an effort to ensure these future celestial incarnations know what to do when the time is right. They foolproofed this by making it so the poneglyphs also emit a message that can only be heard through the voice of all things, ensuring that even if the Kazuki's cipher was forgotten, the incarnations themselves could still figure it out. The next line is, "The sun god dances and laughs, guiding the world to its end." This is likely just referring to both Luffy's and Loki's roles in upturning the status quo. It's kind of vague and could point to so many things that could happen in the future leading up to the end of the third world and the birth of the fourth. The next line is, "The sun returns and brings a new morning." Pretty clear cut, it's talking about Luffy defeating Blackbeard and enacting the dawn of the world at the end of the series. It will also have a double meaning, as I believe Luffy will defeat Blackbeard and activate the weapon on God Valley, as the dawn is literally breaking on the horizon. And finally, the Harley ends with, "and they will surely meet," which I believe simply refers to all of the Dawn Celestial Incarnations finally being aligned under Luffy, as the solar system regains alignment with the sun as the center of it, finally in one piece. Now, I believe this heliocentric universe is the most likely option for what the solar system looks like at the end of One Piece. However, there is a potential way that Oda could take this to the next level that I'd like to discuss. There is a chance that Oda is tying the ending of One Piece to the three-body problem. This physics problem dates all the way back to 1687, where it was posited by Isaac Newton himself, in the same book where he published the laws of motion and the laws of universal gravitation. The concept tied to every aspect of this geocentric to heliocentric theory. After figuring out the solution to the two-body problem, as in the relationship between the Earth and the Moon, or the Sun and the other planets in the solar system, Newton tried to calculate if you could create stability between three bodies all caught in each other's gravitational pulls, and he specifically tried to do this using a system similar to the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth. The two-body problem is very predictable and calculable. We can calculate how one body orbits another, but the three-body problem is much more chaotic and unstable. I'm not going to pretend I know the specifics of the science behind this, but there is no general closed-form solution to this problem. There are, however, several special case solutions, which are perfect for a fantasy series. Now that the Sun, Moon, and Earth, Luffy, Law, and Vivi, are in harmony, Oda may have come up with a way for these three bodies to orbit each other in some theoretical way to create a new kind of celestial system. The Sun, Moon, and Earth locked harmoniously in orbit with each other, with the 8 other planets orbiting outside of this core. Maybe the trick is to use the weapon on God Valley to make the Sun, Moon, and Earth equal in size. Maybe the Sun needs to be a little bigger and the Moon a little smaller. Maybe Blackbeard has his own chaotic answer to the three-body problem. Maybe the crew decides to do this so they don't have to shrink the Earth in order to create the All-Blue. But this would truly differentiate between the world Luffy creates and the worlds of the past. Now, personally, I think it's more likely that the Will of Dawn and Dusk is just heliocentrism versus lunarcentrism. It fits with the symbolism of Luffy, the Sun, and Blackbeard, the Moon, as the captain of their crews, the other incarnations orbiting them, and also fits cleaner with the Dawn and Dusk duality. But there are ways Oda could use this three-body problem as old as the laws of gravitation itself to elevate the ending of One Piece. It could also be a situation where Oda decided that if he could think up an interesting solution to the three-body problem by the end of the series, he would use it, but he could always just fall back on heliocentrism if he couldn't. But regardless of how Oda decides to end all this, I hope that after this video, you understand the immense amount of foreshadowing Oda left regarding this cosmic element of the One Piece, and that this battle between heliocentrism, lunarcentrism, and geocentrism is the reason Luffy was always meant to be a sun god from the very beginning. And with that, I will keep the outro to this video short and sweet. I am FreeAZ, a musician and artist with dreams to create a donations-based record label and cover a different genre every album, then eventually expand this freedom of artistic expression concept to other forms of art. I released a new song on July 4th. Please go listen to me scream about revolution. Good luck following your own dreams. Peace, everyone.